Okay, so Gordon, thank you for talking with me. You've been involved with the men's movement for over 40 years at least. So what got you involved in the men's movement at first?
Well, the very first thing was I caught my wife, a friend of mine taking my wife to bed, and I watched from outside his house by just a fluke, had no concept that anything was going on, and I was livid, and my first thought was to kill them both. And then I thought, well, no, I'll kill myself because, I had a daughter, and if I killed them, I'd go to prison and not be able to raise our daughter. And I truly believe to this day that if had I had a gun, in that moment, I would no longer be here.
Wow.
I was so enraged. And as we know about suicide, the first few minutes are really dangerous. And if we can find a way to delay that thought, and 75% of suicides are men, and 82% of boys that die by suicide, 82% of youth are boys who die by suicide. So it's this immediate reaction. And so anyway, in Kansas, you're allowed to get a divorce. It's supposed to be 6 months, but get a divorce immediately if somebody is in harm's way. And I was in harm's way. And so within a week, we were divorced. But with the divorce, my former wife did not want to have custody. She wanted me to have custody because it would have impacted her relationship with the man that she ended up with. And we went to court, and the judge and both of our lawyers disagreed with that the child should go with the mother. This is pre Kramer versus Kramer. And he postponed the hearing overnight. And that night, I took my daughter to TG&Y, and we got photos, passport photos that they used to have on those photo machines. And I went down to the county courthouse, or the city courthouse, before our hearing to apply for passports, because I was going to go out of the country and with my daughter, not knowing that had we gotten, and I'd gone to Mexico, had we gotten into Mexico, they would have caught us at the border because I didn't have a notarized letter from my wife that I could take her out of the country. And that got me into really working with men in Kansas City about fathering, because all of the input that I got from women didn't compute. It's not the way I see raising a kid. And differences, men and women, quite often in raising children. And so I started that group. And then when I moved Natalie and myself and my then girlfriend 2 years later to San Francisco, I found out about the California Men's Gathering. And I went to the fourth one of those. And there I found out about the national, at that time, NOCOM, National Organization for Men Against Sexism, or for changing men. And I went to the sixth one of those. And of course, you and I know we were on the Women and Men's task group or wherever it was at NOCOM, which is now NOMAS. And then it's just grown from there.
What year was that you moved to San Francisco?
76. Got the divorce in 74, moved to San Francisco in 76.
The early men's movement, the people that I think of that were instrumental were Herb Goldberg, The Hazards of Being Male, Warren Farrell's book on men's liberation. Did those books influence your thinking?
Um, no, both of those, and I know Warren personally. I knew Herb knew me, and I knew him peripherally. We never met in person. I see a different way, and I did end up as co-chair for NOMAS, which is the largest pro-feminist organization in the country. And then there, I introduced them to Jack Kammer and Fred Hayward and Tom Williamson, who were major leaders on the fathers' rights side. And I actually got them to come to a conference up in Seattle, and then all hell broke loose because Bob Brannan and I forget the woman's name, but several of them did backdoor politics and tried to get me thrown out. And all I was doing, and I had all of their permission, all I was doing is let's talk. Let's communicate back and forth. We did that with Michael Kimmel and Iron John.
Robert Bly?
Names.
Robert Bly. Yeah, Robert Bly. And had them at a conference and talking about it. But NOMAS at that time was very, very angry at anything that was talking about fathers' rights or fathers' issues. And one of the pleasing things is that I got Charlie Kreiner. Did you ever know Charlie? No.
He was the big leader of men's work in the RC, the Reevaluation Counseling community. And he had groups all over the world with men working on issues. And the RC theory about power and patriarchy and all, if anybody is disempowered, everybody's disempowered. And they actually allowed him to run for the council seat. And he was with the council, the NOMAS council, until I think his death, when he passed away. And he introduced a lot, and maybe they just put up with it, but he introduced a lot of the theory that how we don't shame men, we don't push against them, we work with them to see, both of us to see wider perspectives. And I think that worked for a while. What is bothering me right now is that I never see in anybody's work, and I've just challenged the state of Oregon about this, I've never seen anybody's work in articles or anything else in the last several years that doesn't have toxic before or after the word masculinity. So our kids are seeing that. The only thing anybody sees now is toxic masculinity, or the masculinity with toxicity. They're not seeing any of the other pieces of toxicity. And so where does a man or where does a boy go? You know, I am masculine, I am male. Well, like John Stoltenberg wrote, Refusing to be a Man. You know, he had a whole book on that. And he was Andrew Dworkin's, I think they were housemates for a long time. And of course, Andrea is, we don't need males, or she was years ago. I don't know that she's still alive. I have a hard time keeping track. But anyway.
Why was
I know John
Nomas
Cohen had passed away.
why was Nomas uncomfortable with fathers' rights issues? They thought it wasn't feminist?
Anything that looked at the issue, they had a children's task group too, but it was only looking at the issue as the damage that they get from men. It didn't look at the damage that children get from women, and we know that 6 out of the 7 child maltreatment issues in the nation, women have a much higher rate of abuse of children than men. And in the sexual abuse category, mothers represent 40% of the parental sexual abuse of children. Fathers represent 60%. And that's, and I've got the documents from CCH, whatever the government agency is up there that does the annual child maltreatment issues. But I think there was so much, well, when, what was her name? She wrote Behind Closed Doors, Wallerstein?
Judith Wallerstein?
Judith Wallerstein. You know, she did 10 years of research before she wrote that book. And then she wrote another book 10 years later. And from the first book, she got death threats, you know, and it's not acceptable communication to come from the feminist side of the issue. And so there was a lot of that react to it. And I still think, and I looked at their website a couple of days, it still doesn't feel like there's space for positive masculinity. It doesn't feel like that. And the groups that they have and the task groups they have and all are, if they look at any adult behavior, it's invariably the negative behavior of men.
That's Nomas you're talking about.
It just doesn't feel like Nomas, yeah. And it just doesn't feel like, even to this day, and Moshe, I just had communication with him.
With who?
And he's the director, Moshe, M-O-S-E, his last name, but he's the director, I believe, out of Colorado. And we remain good friends. And I really honor the work he is trying to do within the organization. The fence, every now and then, he's definitely extreme pro-feminist. Harry Brode, I always liked his position in things, and I think Barry Shapiro is still involved with Nomas, and he's got a wider perspective. But people like Brannon and Stoltenberg have no perspective except one issue, and I think that's unfortunate.
And what's the issue? That men are violent?
Well, the patriarchy is at fault for everything, and men run the patriarchy. Although if you look at many countries around the world, women are the leaders. They're the head of the countries, and you know, all what's her name? The Aldrich, our Secretary of State under Clinton, Madeleine
Albright.
Albright,
yeah.
Yeah, you know, boy, you didn't mess with her. You know, the communists are nobody messed with her. And yet, in that power that she had is power that men have. Unfortunately, there aren't enough women in those positions in the world that I think if women ran the world, it'd be run just about the way it is now with men. it's a little different perspective, but we're still going to go to war, and we're still going to fight each other. And Reagan, the Prime Minister of England, when Reagan was in,
Margaret Thatcher.
She colluded, Thatcher. She colluded with Reagan to really damage our whole world around power and control. So I actually believe that there is no pure. I don't know what the word is, like androgynous, where the women and men have equal power and equal opportunity to do anything. In matriarchies, I've seen it with Native American, with Navajo and all. When women control, it's a matriarchy, but they've got specific roles and men have specific roles. And you don't cross those roles, And so I don't really see, and I've been looking the last couple of weeks at African cultures and some of the ones that have hardly ever been visited by human beings. And I still don't see men doing all of the roles and women doing all of the roles. And so I've got as many men doing sewing as I do as women doing sewing. Except I did see yesterday in one country where the men are the ones that do the sewing and do the clothing for people. And I saw that with a Singer sewing machine out on the street in his community, sewing up these beautiful garments. And the women did other things,
Have you heard of?
So there was some cross there, but.
Have you heard of Rojava, Rojava, in northern Syria, the Kurds? They are really committed to equal representation, and women serve in the military. So that's the society that I know of that's really trying the hardest to have equality and representation.
Well, I'll look that up. I know there was in Afghanistan, and I just saw this in the last week, a group of women who they got they were required to, or the family set them up for marriage. The women did this, they didn't go to school, etc. And this group of women became very militant. And the piece that I saw on the internet was that they took on ISIS and got them and killed them and got them out of their part of the country. And just recently, and of course, Israeli women have been in the military in combat forever, and a lot of Latin American countries, the women fight. But the piece is, what about everything else? Is it equal for women and men to do anything in that culture? Can men raise children as well as women? And now, of course, not birthing, but I know that men can breastfeed children and take that part of that responsibility if we wanted to. But most things are equal. There shouldn't be anything, the fire department or a bomber or a tank or anything that women should be allowed to do all of it, including play pro football, pro basketball. The NBA sets up one size basketball, and the WBA sets up another one, and NCAA sports set it up so that women won't be able to play with a man-sized basketball because of their hands, their smaller hands, you know, and I see these little kids handling that basketball very well. So it was one of those patriarchal things or sexist things that keep women out of those sports.
What other men's groups, organizations are there? For a while, wasn't there one that was more masculinist and not feminist? An organization?
Well, I've got on my website, which still gets about 3 million hits a month.
Wow.
Menstuff.org. I've broken down, and I haven't looked at it for a long time, but I broke down like 6 different men's movements. And of course, there's the pro-feminist, and there's the men's rights, and there's the mytho-poetic, which is the Robert Bly section with a lot of the therapists. And there's Promise Keepers, which is through religion, primarily evangelical. And there's pro-feminist, and there's RC, Reevaluation Counseling group. And within, I don't know really where it fits, but I know almost all of those segments have gone to sleep, except one segment in what I guess I would call mytho-poetic, but it really isn't. And that is the New Warrior training adventure, which is now called the Mankind Project. And that's a project that started in 1985 in Michigan, in Wisconsin, by 3 men. I went through the program in 1990, and to date, there are over 60,000 men that have done that world ride. They're in 22 different countries. They have over 2 in a non-pandemic year. They do 200 trainings, weekend trainings a year. And I know I've got Swahili brothers, and I've got the Australian original people, brothers that have gone through that. I've got brothers inside Folsom Prison that we've worked with after they went to prison and had them working on getting in touch with who you really are at your core, not what you've been trained, you know, make a lot of money and cause power over people and that kind of stuff. And that is the only movement. Now, I know Men's Sex and Power. The guy's out of Oakland, and he did Women's Sex and Power, and he wrote a couple of books. And he had his people on Oprah and Donahue back in the day, and they're the ones that go, they do the ape thing.
I don't know about them.
And I found him very, Sterling, Justin Sterling. If you've never heard of Justin Sterling, wow, that surprises me. Mm-mm. Well, all of his work, I rebelled openly against it because the way it talked about women, etc. And it's still not very strong. The only ones that you see that was going on for a number of years or in any of those groups, the Promise Keepers has died out very strongly. And I'm disappointed in that because, yes, I disagree with their evangelical religious beliefs that men can control. You know, men are superior to women, women are support men. But that's their religion, you know, and the Promise Keepers made men make promises to their family. And I talked to a number of wives over the years that were so thankful that their husbands went to Promise Keepers. Because, they're not going to leave their religion, chances are. Some of them, but not most of them. Most of the Mormons don't, the community, even the FDR community, the polygamists. Most of them don't leave those communities. So working with the people that are still in the community to keep families together and keep men on the right path to being a father and to being a husband and the wage earners and to be that and not try to control what outsiders believe they should believe. Just make them better men and not toxic men or not men with masculine toxicity or toxicity masculine. Make them soft if they want soft. I'm working with trans and some work in suicidality in the state of Oregon because they've been born under a male culture and male wiring. And what that produces in them, even as they transition. 4 times, I think it's 4 times trans women are killed and commit suicide at almost 4 times the rate as trans. And, it's that masculine training that the culture gives, in my opinion, that the culture gives and that is partially wired into us when we're born as men or women. And so anyway, and as I say, the Mankind Project is the only one nationally that I see. And in fact, I'm still doing the calendars on, and I had the only ones that I really kept track of there were probably 15 local men's gatherings, like the California Men's Gathering and Mainly Men, and I list them on the website, but all of those are shut down right now until COVID, of course, opens up and able to do those things again. But most of the weekend men's work has disappeared. Most of those therapists, they were all run by therapists. Most of those therapists have gone on to other things. Even Robert Bly, he doesn't do the men's gatherings anymore, or the gatherings anymore. He does the mother, the mother ritual one. Done it for years, but that's the only one I think he's doing anymore.
When you did the training, what was the goal? What did they want you to walk away with? How did they want you to be different as men?
The process, well, it feels, and it doesn't come from that theory. Part of the theory is initiation, being initiated as a man, but it feels a lot like the inner child stuff is getting in touch with your inner child through different processes to get an indication of why you're here. And then come up with a mission. And in the work, and it's really work, it's intense work. It goes on for 2.5 days. Starts Friday night and it ends around noon on Sunday. And challenging. And incredibly powerful. And men come away, some men have trouble with it, but most of the men I know come away from it with a mission that they go back into their community and they are seen by their family and by their community as really different men that have matured and been initiated as not a toxic man, but a man, not through the military or not through getting somebody pregnant or those initiations, but actually being initiated to know who they are. And then a big part of it is, and Bill Kauf was one of the founders who has now moved to Ashland. We're really good friends, and he's in a group that I started with the state. Um, they he wrote a book about starting men's groups, and it's a really different way to start a men's group. But after training, what they try to do is set up an 8-week course with the men that took the training and try to say on how to start an I group. It's an integration group to integrate this stuff into your life. And then you start your own group, usually with some of the men that went through the training with you, and they go on for every week or once a month for years. Some of the groups, Jed Diamond was in one of those, and he's still in a men's group from the New Warrior training. And that's the powerful thing, that it's not sitting around in an I group and saying, well, what'd you do? What's up this week? Well, I had a little trouble with my boss or whatever. It's to get down and how are you achieving your mission and how it's impacting your life and what can we do to help you. So it's really supportive, and every week, when I was in the I group in San Francisco, every week we got really, really deep. With at least, there were 5 of us, and at least 2 or 3 of the guys got to do work every week, and in deep work to really integrate. I came away from the weekend with my mission was to end men's isolation. Look what I've done. I took that in 1990. It wasn't until 1996 that I started the menstuff.org, and I started the little magazine that led to menstuff.org. And that is all about ending men's isolation still to this day. I still put on stuff every week. And I still got a couple of the counselors or the columnists, and I got 60 columnists that send me a new column every month, you know. So it's really about getting down to this deep stuff and digging it out and exposing it. If you don't reveal it, you can't heal it. So it's really to get it out, stop keeping it a secret, stop keeping it to yourself, stuff that you have never told a therapist. They'll tell your significant other because they might leave you. Something you're ashamed of in your life that is actually still drawing you down. And I really value that work. I think that's really, really powerful work.
What do you hear about young men? Are young men doing the work, or is it all baby boomers?
Well, no. A lot of millennials are doing it. There's just the men where the elders are working with young men for initiation. And I got a good friend in down the peninsula, and his group is Chicano, and they are working with a group of Hispanic, or I hate that word, it's a government word, Chicano boys to end that kind of work. and they've got a whole training called Voice to Men, and that's been around for, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 years, and it's initiating the young boys to become men, but the healthy men, the way it can't be like it is in the American culture or in the African culture. It can't be those kind of initiations because those just don't relate to how our children have been raised. But it takes a very strong approach and a very balanced approach in honoring the feminine and honoring gay men. And in fact, it was working with, it was doing more work with men who were bi, gay, trans, bi, let me just put it bi gay right now. Before Nomos was able to get many women involved, you know, and the feminist movement had a really hard time getting women of color involved for years. And the Mankind Project was, when I took the training in 1990, there were a number of gay bi men and a number of BIPOC men in the program. And I have staffed those trainings, and they'll have a staff training, like they'll have what we call 30 initiates. And for every initiate, 2 staff members that volunteer their time and actually pay up to $150 or $200 to come and staff for those men to show how much we care and then work. And it doesn't have to be friends that are going through the training, but it's just that kind of to support men in becoming really balanced men. And I pulled up trans because I wanted to say this. I know that as much as 5 years ago, we were initiating trans men. And I was at one of those trainings near Sacramento. And I went back because of that, the fact that we were initiating somebody who was a trans man. And I wanted to ensure the safety and to ensure that if it triggered any of the men that were going through as staff, and if it triggered their stuff or any of the buried homophobia or any of that kind of stuff, that there was somebody that, because I knew in San Francisco, I knew a number of trans men. Just basically, well, David Steinberg's, the work he did in the San Francisco area, and the books that he put out and all on healthy sexuality, I knew that community and a number of people in it. And so I wanted to be there to ensure the safety of both sides. But it was 5 years ago at least that they were initiating trans men. Tell me any organization that works with men or any women's organization that workshop trainings, etc., that any women's organization that initiates trans women. I'd like to see it. I'd love to know it. Or any other men's organization that initiates trans men.
When
I think it's remarkable.
Yeah, what kind of ceremony or ritual creates the initiation? How does that happen?
It's secretive.
And
it's like if it's secretive because, and you never took my work on healing the fatherhood or clearing the air between women and men. There are a lot of processes in there that if the purpose of an experiential process is experience it, and if people know what the outcome is or how it's done, they don't get that experiential experience. It's like, oh, I already know this, or it doesn't trigger those pieces that are inside the psyche that, like working with a therapist and doing trainings with therapists. The most difficult people that I had to work with in my workshops were 4 days and almost all experiential. And the most difficult people to work with were therapists because they were in their mind and they were thinking about the processes and, oh, well, this is going to lead to anger and I can't let anybody know how angry I am and all that kind of stuff. So it is really to work with that in an initiation that is done in tribal community. The boys or the men that are going through it don't have any clue of what it's all about. Or a walkabout in Australia, they don't have a clue except they just know that they've got to go out in the wilderness for a month and survive. And they don't know what's going to happen, what's set up for them, what is prepared, or what they're going to be going through. And if they did, it's like the mind is going to control it. And many cultures that I have worked with, and even the Balinese on the Dancing on the Fire, they go in to an unconscious state. And all of these cultures that I've seen you can't change in your mind. It's got to be in the other realm so that it takes over and makes a change. Otherwise, your conscious mind is challenging the 90% of your decisions that are unconscious, that you have no control over until you get control or awareness of them. Then you can do some work with them. But the work that we did and a lot of the indigenous cultures do, is that mind work, like peyote, to the center. All the peyote art, there's always a center to the lower levels, and ayahuasca is the same way from Peru. My sister was actually a Lakota pipe carrier, and she worked with a Peruvian medicine man and brought him up to Portland every year and did the mind journeys. And I've got all the materials and I've done all of that. And that's the way that a lot of change happens. It's not sitting to me and listening to what's his name, Warner, talk and put his little charts up and all of that kind of stuff. It's not in the head. It circumvents the mind so that change can happen.
What do you think is the reason that teenagers today are increasingly anxious and depressed? They have a lot of mental health issues. Is there something going on that makes them more anxious?
Well, in everything I've seen and read, it's cell phones. That has destroyed children's knowledge, thinking, decision-making, desire. They sit in front, I think the average is 6 to 8 hours a day on Facebook, and that was before the pandemic.
Well,
you
it's
know,
not. They
and
don't go to
they're wrapped
Facebook.
up in all of that. Well, I mean, that's when, well, a lot of them still do, but that is what, Gail,
Yeah, it's social.
they've had cell phones. They've had cell phones for 20 years. That's where they went. And they were on Facebook primarily, MySpace actually, Facebook, and then Twitter, and now TikTok and Instagram and all of that. But they got trained not to think, not to communicate.
Mm.
And therapists have told me this. It is very difficult to work with anybody that is over, well, I think it's too late. I think the 5-year-olds can't do it either. They can't communicate like you and I are communicating. They have been trained to text and then think about it before I text back, and then text back my answer. And then that person thinks about it and then texts back the answer. And it's all of that thinking and figuring out in between rather than having a live conversation. And they're having a really difficult time with anybody in high school today because they can't think. And in fact, I got a book that is incredible, iGen. And it's why today's super connected kids are growing up less more tolerant, less happy, and completely unprepared for adulthood.
That's Gene
That
Twenge.
is incredible. And what?
Gene
Yes.
Twenge, yeah.
Yes. It's incredible. And we're seeing it. You know, the kids just are not thinking. They'll go to the internet. They'll go to Google to get the answer and not have to figure it out. That's what I liked about core teaching. What was it? Core communication. The way of teaching a couple of years ago. Core. Anyway, it was to not figure out 2 + 2 is 4, but why, or what other options are there to get to 4, and think instead of memorize. Because we can't memorize it all, and then they fall back on Google for the answer. You know, it's like in the old days going to Cliff Notes. You know, well, there was only one set of Cliff Notes then. Now there's hundreds of false, negative answers to the question, and you really have to dig deep to be sure it's factual. No, that it's just not coming out of left field. So I think that's the big problem, and getting kids away from their cell phones. They can't concentrate in class, and then the school wants to have the kids put their cell phones in a box in the hall, and the parents are rebelling because they can't get a hold of their kid. And 10 years ago, they couldn't get a hold of their kid anyway until they went through the office and got a slip that went to the kid, and they got the answer. Now the parents want to have that immediate contact so they can figure out in the middle of the time when the kid's studying, they can figure out what the kid wants for dinner. You know, and that it just, until we get the cell phones out of the class, I don't think we're going to have any way in hell of educating our kids. And I put a whole thing on my website called 2030. And it's all this information. What jobs are going to be available in 2030 and what ones aren't. And over 50% of the jobs that are being done today will not be done by humans in 7 more years or 9 years. And so are the kids learning to be prepared for that? Because they aren't going to be able to flip burgers. There isn't going to be a human flipping burgers or doing fries or probably delivering the food to the front counter. It's going to be machines.
Robots.
And I've got a lot of videos on there. Yeah, robots. And I've got a lot of videos on there about the technology that they're looking at right now. The one machine, Go is the toughest game in the world. And there are more ways to win at Go than other games in the world. And the best person in the world can do that against this computer. And it was talking about AI, and people think that AI is just all the information that's stored in the computer's brain. But new AI is that, and then it uses its algorithms to figure out different ways to get there that have never been programmed into the brain. And this kid, it was a kid, went up against the computer, lost 4 out of 5 games. And if he ever played that 15, he'd lose it. Because the computer now has that storage another way. And he and all these people that were observing that are experts in the world said that the 4 he lost to, that move had never been made by anyone. The computer figured it out on how to beat him at his own game. And they're going to figure it out. Their AI is going to advance very quickly and figure out things that are not input, but they're what is input, and then the computer figuring alternatives. Is there something else I can grab from over here and do this over here and come out with a new solution that nobody has ever considered in their life? We're not trained our kids to go into that culture.
Why do you think that over 70 million people voted for Trump and so many people love Trump's brand of masculinity?
Well, I don't know that that's true. I know that 70 million people voted for him. But, and honestly, the Democrats did a terrible job. And Clinton did a terrible job putting these people down. I forget what she called them.
Deplorables.
But it was really deplorables. Now, if I wanted deplorables to vote for me, I don't use them. I don't tell them that. Democrats for years, and I'm a Democrat. The Democrats for years have talked down as Republicans are stupid. You know, they're backwoods, they're all that kind of stuff. I tell you, I know a lot of really smart Republicans in Curry County. You know, I know a lot of really smart Republicans in my life. They aren't dumb people, but they won't be talked down to. And they've got up until Trump, and I don't think, I can't estimate, but I would say less than 40% of the 70 million that voted for Trump aren't anymore. I think they finally got the message. I think that voted for him because the Democrats haven't done for years. They've talked about working for the working class, and they did nothing with Detroit. They did nothing with metal workers or coal workers or any of that kind of stuff. And they didn't really support unions. They just sort of, you know, they don't have a spine, in my estimation. They won't stand up and fight. We won against Bush if we'd stood up down in Florida, but we didn't. We don't fight like that. We don't fight like the Republicans. The Republicans fight like that and win because they find every nick and corner that they go out with. I think there is hope when we look at Georgia. Now, there's going to be millions of dollars the Republicans are going to spend in Georgia to get that back. But we won. Freedom won. The Constitution won. And I think when people really realize Trump's whole program and the current Republicans that are in office, whole program is to benefit the upper class and not workers and not people of color and not children, not LGBT, and not anybody that has a hard time voting, disabled people, all that kind of stuff. What is it, 80 new laws that are in current state legislators to stop mail-in ballots, not recognizing, not giving ballots anymore, not letting anybody bring somebody else's ballot. You know, I'm in a lung, and I've got to physically bring my ballot in to get it checked off by somebody. That's what the Republicans are trying to do in Republican states, where it's controlled by the Republican legislator. And Democrats have to, and independents have to stand up and say no.
Yeah, but why do you think that Trump could get away with adultery, harassing women, saying he was it's okay to knock around the media? I mean, he's like the epitome of any negative stereotype of masculinity. Why is that appealing to millions of people who love him?
They're getting tired of being talked down to, and they wanted somebody to stand up and present a different view. And I take it back to Hillary. It was and I voted for Hillary. I would have voted for Bernie Sanders because it was really the DNC that worked against Bernie Sanders. And then Hillary hired the woman that headed the DNC when she got kicked out of the DNC, for all of that underground manipulation. But
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yes. And it's that kind of politics. I almost voted against her because of that, but I couldn't stand Trump. I thought that was dirty politics, and it's the old Democrats that are still controlling the Democratic Party, and I don't know that we'll hold 2022 because I love what Biden is doing and Kamala, and I really like the person he picked for that. I'm really liking most of his cabinet choices, but it's still the old-time corporate thinking, and in the party, and I think that does not appeal to young people. It does not appeal to BIPOC. It does not appeal to LGBT, and it does not appeal to young people coming up. And we've got to really look at that or they do. They've got to really look at that to change. I think a lot of people, farmers were getting screwed by the Democrats. Obama, and I love him, and I love most of his programs, but he removed more immigrants, disallowed more immigrants from coming into the U.S. than anybody.
He did more deportations.
Immigration deportations, and he put in the DREAM Act, and I love that. He deported people way more. And so, I think we've really got to think about the policies that we put out and balance them with that part of the electorate that were always Democrats. The Republicans, they're so used to spewing lies and their electorate, the people that vote for them are, a lot of them, I'd say 50% of them, are locked into that. All of this is locked. Everything that's happened. Biden didn't win. All the conspiracy theories. Antifa was really the ones that came and stormed the Capitol. Huge numbers of people in the United States believe that Antifa, when there hadn't been one single Antifa person found that was there, and it's going to be an uphill battle. I think that the 1.9, I'm really against Mention. Is it the guy that stalled the vote on the Recovery Act for 24 hours? He was the one that was going to vote against it.
Oh yeah, West Virginia.
Mention. Yeah, that really upsets me because it shows that the Democrats can't stand together, and will undermine everything that he voted for was what the Republicans wanted, and the Republicans still didn't serve. And he took $300 million away from helping people on unemployment. Took it from $400 a week to $300 a week. Reduced the $1,400 check. Now I agree with reducing the $1,400 check to people that are making $150,000 a year, or a couple that's making $300,000 a year. I think it should be down to closer to people making $50,000 a year and a couple making $100,000, and nobody that's making more of that gets money from the government.
Yeah, no, I think it was.
People that need it.
I think it's like 80,000 for individual and 150 for couple.
Right.
So it seems like the men's
150 and 300.
It seems like the men's movement is pretty quiet. Do you have any thoughts that it could start up again after the pandemic is over, or is it not pertinent in the same way? Where is it headed, looking at men's roles?
Well, Mankind Project's going to definitely go on, and it's going to be very strong. They're just waiting. They've got men waiting to take that program and do that work. I don't see any leaders out there. I don't see anybody there's a men's work, I think it's called. And I know most of the men that are in that, like Ray Arata and boys and men training coming up that you might want to take by some of those men. You remember Mun Wah?
No.
You remember Mun Wah?
No.
He's the one that did The Color of Fear, the movie. He was part of the California Men's Gathering, and he would do. Anyway, he's in it. Daniel Ellenberg, who's a psychologist that I know I'm in a men's group with, is in it, and somebody else that I've known from the past. But it's called Creating Connection and Community Through Courageous Conversations. It's a Zoom conference on the 12th and 13th. It's understanding diverse perspectives on the life of men and boys. And I think that it's $89. It's run out of Rutgers. And it's the one thing the night of the 12th. That's Keynote, The Color of Your Fear, Courageous Conversations about and race, and that's Levant. And then There's 2 sessions on Saturday, one 12 to 2 and one 2:30 to 4:30. And I'll email that to you.
Okay.
But I don't see any leaders in the men's movement anymore. John is backed out. Mark, the guy down in Austin, Texas, with the Wild Men, has backed out. The therapists around here that were running programs, Daniel was one of them. A whole bunch of men around here in the Bay Area, they aren't running any men's work anymore. They're doing men's groups in therapy, but most of those men are 65 and over now, you know. And we didn't develop any follow-up to us. We didn't develop anybody to take over the reins, except the Mankind Project did a really good job of that. You know.
What about?
I don't.
You've been in a men's group ongoing for 40 years. You said what? You connect on Zoom now, and what have you seen as current issues that men talk about in that group?
Well, they're all therapists but me. And there's 7 of them and me, and this group started with Shepherd Bliss and was in it, and back in the day. Started as salons at Shepherd's Place and a couple other places. And then there was just this group, basically from Berkeley and the East Bay and Marin, that started going together. And the group that I was involved with, they were all therapists except me. And it was basically the guys that went down to the California Men's Gathering. And we'd go down there and do stuff. Alan Acacia and Alan Potasiak and Jeff Russell and Eric, God, names, and I've known him for so many years. Right now, what we've done is we met monthly on Friday afternoon because they don't do therapy on Fridays. And it carried overnight, and then we'd have a morning session and then go home around noon. And it was just basically what's going on in men's lives, because they were all therapists and working with men, and what's going on in our lives and the difficulties and aging and things like that. And so we've gone to quarterly during the pandemic, and in fact, we've got one coming up in the 26th, I think, or maybe it's the 1st of. Anyway, we've got one coming up, and we'll Zoom in, and then until dinner time, and then we'll come back in the morning and Zoom in. And several of them in the Bay Area may actually meet face to face, but that waits to be seen until the day happens. You know how safe they feel. And I know Jed Diamond's group is still going on up in Wilt area, and of the Mankind Project, those groups, integration groups, many of those have been going on for 20 years.
Wow!
And they're starting a group after every single training because it's so valuable. Some of the Sterling Institute groups get together and form similar groups to the I groups, but they're more around projects for the community. But that's still happening. Well, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's still happening. That's basically the Bay Area, I think, now. But I don't see any men, Bly or any of those guys that are. I don't even see any writing on men. Any new books on men coming out. And I think that's just my view is about 10 years ago, men started going away from doing personal work and started doing relational work. And I know a lot of people like Hendricks and Levy, I think, and a lot of those trainers were doing a lot of relational work. And in my opinion, you can't clean up your relationship until you clean up your own stuff on how you are with the other sex and how you are in late situations. And so that work, when we talk to men about doing that work, it's like, well, there's this couples workshop, and I think I'll go to that, you know. And it's not intense work for most couples work. It's not intense. The clearing the air between women and men was 6 days long that we did, and it was 6 women and 6 men, and it was intense. And you couldn't be in a couple relationship to do it, you know. So it didn't get the other dynamic in there. It was more work about your stuff with men and my stuff with women, and get that cleaned up and clear the air at whatever energy level, except violence, that it takes. Not even hitting Bataka, you know, getting rid of all of that energy. But I don't know, you know. And then you look at what is it, 1442 or whatever it is, the retreat center down in the peninsula. 14.
You don't mean
It's
Esalen.
well, no. It's, in fact, Warren Farrell, I think, has moved his stuff from Esalen to this place. And it's a very swank place, and it's got the high end of the people that went to Esalen. And it's beautiful. It ain't cheap. But, you know, I saw one of the trainings that I did in San Francisco years ago is for Friday night to Sunday noon is $1,400.
Wow.
You know, who? There's one group of people that are going to do that, and that's millennials that are khaki people. The guys all wear khaki and Weegians, you know. I don't see a lot of the shamanistic happening now. Michael Harner and Sandberg and all of those people. You know, so many of those teachers have passed away, or they're too old to do the work. You know, and of course we lost Harbin, and there were some good things going on at Harbin, but not many. I think Common Ground is still publishing in Marin, and there's probably a lot of stuff in there, but most of that stuff has gone away from doing relational work. I don't know. I'm curious. You know, we're going to do all of our personal work via Zoom, so you never touch somebody. Or get our own private robot to take a course, so they can do it for us. You don't have a robot. I'll have a robot, and they're the ones that are deal with our family issues, and our mother and father issues.
That would be funny. Thank you. This is a lot of information. Anything you want to add in terms of men's changing roles that we haven't talked about?
Oh, there's just so much, but I just hope. I think men get it being soft. I think, you know, we're seeing some football players that are crying and not getting put down about it. Some of the broadcasters still putting them down, but most of the NFL players are saying, to hell with you. You know, I'm gonna let my body do what it's doing. But we've still got this incredibly masculine culture of big boys don't cry. And I think we're seeing more fathers that are saying it's okay to cry, son, but not enough, you know. I just hope men get in touch if they're going to have a family. Get in touch with why and what your responsibility is to raise both a son and a daughter in conscious terms. And my hope is after the last 4 years of hate that people will take the pendulum the other way and really get back into conscious communication and caring about each other. I think that happened during the pandemic, but also all this other stuff happened during the pandemic too. And it worries me. The next 2 years are going to be big years, tough years to get around. And it may be the end of our democracy. That's the worry I have.
Well, Biden won, Trump didn't.
Well, but the 0 votes from the Republican Party for a $1.9 billion package that had so much to help people, and setting up that, like when Obama was in, McConnell setting up, we're not going to pass anything that's of value to you. You know, we're going to give you 8 years of hell, and they're starting it now.
Yeah.
So, I can't see how anybody single can make it on $15 an hour. And if I work 52 weeks out of the year and have a contract to work 40 hours, that's only $31,000. That is not a lot of money when a lot of people are paying over $1,000 a month for rent. Well over. In San Francisco, it's like $2,400 for a studio.
If you're lucky.
And I don't see, and making $725 is like $15,000. That's barely above poverty. That means no income on anything but necessity, things that'll keep me out of poverty. And then if medicine comes along or my car breaks down or something, I'm in the debt, or my school loan, So but that's that's me. I'm hopeful.
Good.
I am hopeful.
Good. Thank you, Gordon. It was